I'm Suzy.
And I'm Lisa, and this is the Coaching Cast. We're the No Nonsense podcast, chatting about the things impacting you at work right now, helping you to survive and thrive in today's workplace.
We discuss different topics in each episode, sharing our ideas, hints, and top tips from our experiences of working in the corporate world, running our own businesses, and also being qualified coaches. We try to have a few laughs along the way too, because, well, taking ourselves too seriously is just boring. We hope you enjoy listening. In today's episode, we are diving into a fascinating topic of quiet thriving in the workplace, the potential antidote to the concept of quiet quitting, and we share our top tips for cultivating quiet thriving for yourself. So stay with us and enjoy. So, Lisa, how are you today?
Yeah, no, not too bad. I'm currently enjoying winter, in inverted commas, in South Africa. And if anyone who's watching this particular episode will notice the glorious sunshine pouring through my window, my patio.
It's winter.
Back here.
It's winter.
It's winter here, people. And just let me tell you now, winter in Cape Town is even better at the moment for me than summer in the UK. Did you know it was like 23, 24 degrees here yesterday?
Honestly, it's a joke. So today, because obviously I'm in Manchester, it's the 29th of May, okay? And the window is right here in front of me. It's raining and it's grey.
Summer in the UK. Summer in the UK, right?
I think it's probably about, my laptop tells me it's 13 degrees.
Yeah.
There you go. There we go.
So yeah, sorry to everyone who I've just for everyone who's just switched off listening because they're pissed off with my smugness. You know, I apologise, but you know, Suzy asked me how I am. I've told her how I am. I've told her what I'm up to. You may not like that. I apologise in advance. But yeah, how are you? I know you've been busy as well, and I know you've been travelling.
I have. Yeah, I've taken a bit of a page out of your book. I've been getting my Judith Chalmers on. So I've been to Malta, and I've been to Spain as well. Both for like long weekends, which was lovely. Got a little bit of sunshine in Spain, not so much in Malta. It was a bit unfortunate when we went to Malta. Again, just a bit of weather chat. We are
British. That's what we talk about. The Brits always talk about the weather.
Even more so obsessed, I feel like, this year, because it's just been so bad. I got on the plane at Manchester. It was grey and raining. I got off the plane at Malta. It was grey, raining and windy, so we had the addition of wind, and it stayed like that the entire 3 days I was there.
Oh no, that is not what you expect from Malta.
A funny thing happened to me because we were returning back, and you know when you've been through like passport control, because you know now when you go to a European country you've got to like be stamped out now because we're not in the EU.
We're not in the EU anymore.
Anyway, we won't touch on that. And anyway, done all that, and I was like, I was at the gate ready to like go to the plane to board to come back to Manchester, and I was walking towards the gate, and my friend was there, and I was like, my friend Chloe, I was like, Chloe, do you want a drink or whatever? And then suddenly this person just like stood up, and she was like, Suzy, and then she said, I like recognize your voice, and then she was just talking to me, and I was like, yeah, and she just knew like so much about me. She was dead lovely and really like chatty, and she was like waiting to get on the flight as well. And basically we like had a like really extensive conversation about like her and me and everything. And then at the end of that conversation she was like, so yeah, like look forward to like hearing more on the podcast. And I was like, yeah, because the whole time I speak to her, I was thinking, I cannot place this person. I was like, can I place this person? I can't place this person. Can I? I don't know. You look really familiar, but you don't. I just was like, oh gosh. I was trying not to like let on. Anyway, basically, it was a listener. It was a CBB. So in my like moment where I was just processing what was happening, I forgot to ask their name. but I met one of you in real life. So I met you one of my CBBs. I felt like famous for like a few brief
I think
moments.
this is amazing. I love this story so much. I can't believe you got spotted by a CBB at Malta Airport, of all places. And the fact that they knew it was you because of your voice. They recognised your voice. That is so cool. Oh, major shout out to said CBB who met Suzy face to face in Malta Airport on the way back to Manchester.
I hope I lived up to expectation in real life. Like, I don't know, because I think I was just a bit like taken back. I was a bit like, what's happening? Like, I was just processing in the moment. I wasn't quite like, I was like, you know, catching up. So yeah, I hope I was like, as
I'm sure you were
what
great.
you expected.
Did you give her your autograph?
No, but my friend
Did she take a selfie?
Like,
did she take a selfie?
No, but my friend it's so funny. My friend Chloe was like, of course, someone's just coming with you because they recognise your voice. Like,
I love this. Thank you so much to that CBB for listening to this podcast and for approaching Suzy in the airport. You're a legend, and I really hope you hear this episode and hear the shout out for you. And apologies, we don't know your name, but that is just the best. That is the best. Right, should we crack on with this episode then? Because I mean, how can we talk any further about anything else after that amazing story?
I know. Right, let's go.
Better. We'll chat about quiet thriving.
Let's start by defining quiet thriving, a recent workplace trend coined by psychotherapist Leslie Alderman in an article for the Washington Post. The term quiet thriving means actively making changes to your workday in order to shift your mental state and help you feel more engaged and fulfilled in your job. It's about finding satisfaction and success through introspection, steady progress, and deep engagement with your work. Quiet thriving is especially relevant in today's fast-paced work environments where constant connectivity and immediate results are often emphasized. And for many, this can be overwhelming. Unlike the more extroverted concept of thriving, which often involves visible achievements and outspoken participation, quiet thriving focuses on the subtle yet profound ways we can flourish in our roles with a more reflective and deliberate approach to our work. So, Lisa, what are your thoughts on this concept?
That I could learn how to do it better.
I like the honesty to start us off.
Yeah, no, I really like this concept. I've not heard of it before. So it made me think of the importance of taking time out to think. And it's something I talk about often in respect of when it comes to managing people, it's so important that you start with how you manage yourself. Because I think when you know how to manage yourself well, you're supporting you to be at your best at all times. And that will only ever positively impact everyone around you. And I often talk about the best piece of advice that I was ever given as a manager. And that was to take out 30 minutes of my day every week to just thinking, and thinking in a quiet space away from everyone, and just thinking about, what do I think is going well? What do I think is a challenge? What do I think I could be doing even better? What do I think the team could be doing even better? And using that to plan ahead to what changes I was going to make, changes in myself, changes to how I was leading, changes to what we were focusing on. And I remember when I first started doing that and building it as a habit, it felt quite self-indulgent and it felt like the wrong thing to be doing, because at the time I was quite junior in my management experience and I had a very old school view of managing, and that was be visible, be accessible, be around, be active, be involved, be telling, be doing, to justify, I guess, why I was the manager and why I was in the position I was in and the value I was bringing. So this idea of taking myself out and just spending time on my own and doing this thinking just felt quite alien, but it was so invaluable to do it. And it was a practice that I continued to do right throughout my whole corporate career. And it's something I continue to talk about as a, you know, and I offer as advice to managers as well as those that I'm supporting. Because I think if you're not taking the time to do the thinking, are you truly ever making the right decision at that time? Because you're not necessarily considering all the options, all the eventualities. If you're just too stuck in a space of just doing, I think you can get into a space where you're never really checking whether what you're doing is the right thing. And it often, I think, if you're not careful, it can often be the wrong thing. You're just too fixated on the task and just ticking things off. And I think that's as well when you can get stuck and become quite overwhelmed because you're just not stopping to think about it. So like that's what this concept of quiet thriving made me think of. And that whole idea of just how important it is when you've got that level of accountability and responsibility to always be taking time out to reflect and to think. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are to this, because I know for a fact that historically, especially I would have said in my like more immature days of managing and leading people, I probably would have misinterpreted quiet thriving as being disengaged or not working hard enough or not contributing, or because I am a natural extrovert and I know that I've often struggled with introverts because I think introverts generally tend to lean into this really well, and this is something they're very good at because it's more natural to their style. And as a very extrovert person, this is often what I probably would have misjudged, and I know that now, and I knew that towards the end of my senior, like middle management career for sure, but I know I severely struggled with it. So yeah.
Interesting, because yes, I think this is a concept is something that I probably more naturally resonate with, because I'm a little more introverted than yourself. And when I was like looking at this and researching it for the episode today, I was like, yeah, I've done this definitely, and probably still do, although I think I've got worse at it since I've had my own business. I'll come on to that in a second. I think definitely when I was in my senior sales leadership career, I would like be really big on taking time to reflect, both in terms of myself, but also my team and like performance, and maybe just some of the kind of conditions that I was working in, i.e., you know, we had a commercial cycle to adhere to, you know, that drove maybe some of that reflection on a regular basis. And I think that's what this concept is about, partly is about that regular reflection. So like making this a habit. And I definitely did that as a habit for sure. The other piece I think is about recognizing not everybody thrives in like high energy extroverted environments. And because I worked in sales, you know, a lot of people I worked with were really high energy, really extroverted, which was brilliant. Like, you know, they're brilliant attributes and qualities. But actually not everybody has to be like that or demonstrate those traits in order to be successful in sales. And I don't think I really understood that whilst I was in a corporate environment until I left and had my own business and I was just me. And I realized that I can be extroverted and I can be high energy, but equally I can also be quite calm, I can be quite chill, I can be quite inwards. And that's not actually penalize me in any way in terms of like sales and performance. Actually, in some ways that's given people like a reassurance that I'm in some ways like a steady pair of hands, or I'm, you know, I'm reliable in a way that I mean like I'll have loads of ideas, but I will see them through. That's what I mean by reliable. I'm not saying extroverted people aren't reliable. That's not what I mean. So, you know, it's interesting because I feel like that's really those traits and attributes have really helped me since I've had my own business, for sure. I'm recognizing that there's some times, you know, I remember being in my corporate career where I would have been in like a really high energy, kind of like probably quite challenging meeting at times, and then coming out of it and then having to go and sit in a like one-to-one quiet booth with my headphones on, not because I'm trying to be like annoying or I'm trying to be rude, but because actually I just needed to step away from my own well-being to like re-energize in a more inward space. That's all it is, and that's all it was. And I'm like that now, actually. So if I've delivered a workshop that's been really high energy, involved a lot of facilitation, you know, with a lot of people, I can do it in the moment. I love it in the moment. But actually, if you ask me to then do that the following day, I'd probably struggle because I need a bit of time inwardly to just rebalance and re-energize, and then I can go again. So I'm like one of these people who are kind of like on the border of like, I can dial it up quite naturally, but equally I can kind of dial it back quite naturally as well. And then I kind of reach a midpoint day to day.
Yeah.
So I would seek out some of those quiet spaces. I would seek out some of that sanctuary in an office environment in order just to re-energize myself, re-engage with what I was doing, rebalance, for want of a better word. And that's just, I had that, I was very lucky, I suppose, because I had that autonomy to do that for myself. And, you know, and that's part of what we're talking about here in Quiet Thriving, is making those adaptations for yourself, having the autonomy to do that in the environment you're in, or creating that environment for others. If you're, you know, a founder or a director or a leader, creating those environments for others that they have the autonomy to do that for themselves, because everybody's different. And some people are on different, you know, different what's the word I'm looking for here, like, yeah, just different strengths of that extroversion introversion scale, and that's kind of, yeah, my experience of it.
Yeah. And I think a big part of being able to do this is, one, being encouraged to do it. I think it's valuing the importance of reflection, which I think is so invaluable, to be honest. And I don't think it's necessarily spoken about enough. I don't think it's necessarily practiced enough. I don't think it's supported enough. I still think there is that out of date perception of taking time out, taking space, having rest, doing thinking, that's misunderstood or misjudged. But I think that is also about where you're working and whether you've got the right level of trust there from your key relationships and also the business overall. But I think a big part of this is also the communication around it, in terms of communicating what you need, what you're doing, what the intention is, so that actually you're always managing people's expectations and helping them to understand. Because I know, you know, talking about that tip that I was given of take 30 minutes of your diary each week to just do some thinking, block it out, protect it, don't allow anyone to encroach on it. I know that I shared really transparently with my team what that time was for and what I would be doing, so that if they felt an absence, they could understand it. So that it was never I've disappeared off the radar. Like, it was trying to enable them to understand what it was for and what I was doing, and if anything, to encourage them to do the same. You know, it's that role modeling piece of, look, I'm going to do this, I think it's okay, I think it's a good thing to do, I'd support you if you want to do the same.
Absolutely. It's like that, or, you know, the age-old saying that I've said before on this podcast, like, behavior breeds behavior.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Exactly. And I think it's also acknowledging that being quiet isn't, it's not a problem, or it's not an issue, or it's not a demonstration of like obstruction or disengagement always. Like, don't get me wrong, you have got the quiet quitting phenomena as well. And there is an element of, in that sense, the silence is telling us something else. but we shouldn't just assume that it's always that. Like, it never is always anything. And I've worked with plenty of people, yourself included, where actually that quietness, the stillness, was a demonstration of productivity. And actually, that is something to celebrate and also to learn from. It's not that just because you're being quiet doesn't mean you're not thinking. And I think that's something that definitely my perceptions changed as I progressed through my career, that I recognize quietness as actually being really powerful. And it was those individuals who were being quiet who I was most intrigued to understand and listen to and identify what they were thinking, because the majority of the time, if not all the time, they were thinking, not like the rest of us who were chatting, who were just talking. You know, and I know I'm guilty of talking a lot, especially on this podcast, and not always doing the enough of the thinking. You know, I probably speak a lot before I've always processed what I've actually thought about it. I think I've got better at it. I've definitely got better at it over the last 9 years during my coaching, because I've had to really refine my listening skills.
Exactly.
But it's still leaning into a behavior that is not necessarily my natural behavior.
Exactly. It's about like what you naturally feel, or you know, more easy to do, like, because like listening for coaching for me, you know, I know a lot of people can find that something they have to work on. I'm just like, I don't, that's easy for me to activate. Like, I don't have to really think about it. I naturally like listening because it means I, you know, don't have to talk straight away. So actually that gives me the space and the harmony. And actually I'm curious about what the other person's saying, genuinely, because my approach a lot of the time is like, you know, in my coaching and in my work in general, is like to seek to understand. So I need to listen first and foremost. Critical in sales. So, you know, I think there's some benefits of quiet thriving, definitely, around that kind of need for giving that space for listening, for sure. What do you think are some of the other benefits of quiet thriving then?
I think the other benefits are that being present. I think when you're quiet, you give yourself the opportunity to, you know, if you're not speaking, if you're not making noise, you're more aware of what else is going on around you. So I think being quiet and in the moment gives you the opportunity to be present with what's going on, because you can center in on what others are saying, what you're actually thinking in that moment, what's happening, what you can notice. I just think it really helps you to be present, because I think the opposite, there's just a lot of action, activity, noise. And that's where I think you can become quite lost in all of that and not necessarily be centered on what's the facts of the situation, what's truly happening. Are we doing the right thing? Are we stopping to acknowledge what's gone well, what's not? I just think it's just a constant state of movement and sound. So I think that one of the key benefits for me is that being present. And I think also being able to fully engage in detail. Like, I think of that as well, like when you're slowing down and you're spending time to think and to reflect, you absorb so much more as to what's happening, so you can get so much more of the detail. And again, as someone who has a tendency to stay quite high level and move quite quickly, if you're not careful, if you're someone who's equally the same as me, if that resonates with you, you can miss stuff because you're just like cracking on. Like, so I think just taking that time to slow down, be quieter, I think helps you to see and hear and notice things that otherwise you might not.
Yeah. Oh, that detail and clarity bit is really interesting, because I think you're right that it's a benefit of quiet thriving for sure. But actually, as somebody who is a bit more introverted and like is more naturally leans into the detail. I've got worse since I've had my own business. Like, and actually, if I'm given if I've created an opportunity for myself to take some time away to provide a quiet space for reflection, for thinking, oh my God, I'll have a never-ending party with that detail. Like, you won't be able to get me out of it. Like, I'll lean into it so much, I'll have lost track of what I was even looking at to start with. And I've noticed this about myself. I'm kind of going into a slightly different topic now, but I have noticed since I've had my own business, because it is just me and I have people around me who support me with certain things, but it's predominantly just me, that I have to be more detailed. But because that's my natural tendency, I love leaning into it. And actually then I'm like, why are you being so detailed? Like I can see why I'm doing it for myself, but it's frustrating me because I just like go so much into it. And I'm like, no, bring it back, bring it back.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you bring that up, because actually maybe that's a slight conundrum depending on your preference for detail or not of what you may experience when you're creating these spaces for yourself to maybe quietly thrive. You might not be if you love the detail like me.
Yeah, but I think that's true of anything, isn't it? It's like there's always going to be a point where the positives can tip over into the negatives or the unhelpful if they're not managed. And yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. If you're already a detail orientated individual who likes to take their time and is considered, this could cause you to procrastinate. So I think it's ensuring always that you're clear on your objective, what you're trying to achieve, put some structure around it, put a time scale around it, or a time frame, so that you know when to stop, when to switch, when's enough's enough, or what's good enough.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's why, I was so specific about, I'm not saying take time for yourself every week. I'm saying take 30 minutes, especially if you're not doing this already, to build a habit, which is, I think something that would be beneficial in this particular topic. Start small, 30 minutes in the course of 5 days working week, or longer if you work more hours than that, is not really a lot. Absolutely. And it feels like doable to like protect. So just do 30 minutes, see where you get to. And
I think you can, this kind of concept of quiet thriving, and based on what you've just said there, like leans into productivity. So like if you're really strict with yourself, like one of the benefits of this concept is that you will have enhanced productivity, because you'll be so focused on that kind of like either that solo reflection or that kind of solo re-energizing by stepping away and doing something that you're very dedicated on, focused on, which building off your point there on how you can do that for yourself and create that. One of the things that I do, and I've started doing recently, is setting myself a timer. Because because I've said, naturally I want to like get into every single granular bit of the detail, and then something that should have taken me 20 minutes is taking me like an hour and a half, for example. And you could very easily with this concept get into that like way of working, and that's not what this is about. That the benefit of this is that it actually should enhance your productivity.
The point here is the thrive. Like, you're not going to thrive if you just stay in the thinking, the reflecting, and don't structure it in some way so it actually is helpful to you, because otherwise it won't be about thriving anymore. You will just it'll be the opposite. So
set yourself a little timer on your phone, or you can get like for 20 minutes, for example. I think it's called the there's a name for it. Is it called the Pomodoro technique, I think?
I don't know.
It's when you work in short, sharp bursts and you like hold yourself accountable for that really short period. I may have pronounced that wrong. Google it. I'm sure it'll come up. You can get apps. So I use the Toggle app a lot. Again, because I have to hold myself to account for like periods of time. Otherwise, I will have a lovely party with that detail and I won't want to come home out of it. So, this, as Lisa's point said, this is about, the benefit of this is about enabling you to thrive. And there's certain ways that you can kind of create that for yourself as a habit, for sure. Okay, so if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm curious, I've never heard about this concept before, I get it, I think this could work for me. How do you think our CBBs could try quiet thriving for themselves? What are your top tips?
So I think I've probably mentioned my number one, and that is this: start small. You've got to start somewhere. So I would encourage you to book out 30 minutes of your diary every week. I mean, physically, put it in your physical diary so that the time is blocked. And I would encourage you to pick it at a time of the week when you know realistically, most commonly, that's time that you can afford. So don't put it on a day when you know you've got a lot of meetings cyclically or important deadlines. I think I used to always have 30 minutes on a Friday afternoon. Or it might have been a Friday morning, actually, because I know what I'm like. When it hits the afternoon on a Friday, I'm already mentally winding down. So
Yeah.
to actually ensure that I stay committed to doing it, I believe I did it on a Friday morning after my weekly team call that we used to do. So I would start there. That's what I would start doing. And I would encourage you to so take that 30 minutes, put it in the diary. That's my first tip. The second part of this, and probably my second tip, is take yourself out of the space you usually work in to do it. So I think to really help you to be disciplined and to only do this, I think it's removing yourself from your typical work environment where you won't be distracted by your laptop or your phone.
Definitely.
And I think, we talked before about changing your environment, change your state to help with creating some different thinking and to be something inspirational. So I don't mean as in like the space has to be inspirational, but I mean in terms of just helping you to have a different like set of scenery that you're looking at. So like I believe I used to go for a walk, or I used to just change the room I was in. If I was in the office, I would change the space I was in. So I'd come away from the desk. I'd possibly go into we used to have pods, didn't we? We used to go into a pod. Sometimes I go for a walk around the lake that we used to have near the office. But I just used to change where I was. If I was at home, I would just move. I do this now quite regularly still. Now I've got my own business and I'll take myself to a coffee shop. I just always prefer being somewhere else. And I
Or you
find
just
that
love the flat white.
I do
Let's
love a
be
flat white.
honest.
I love the treat. But I love the just the change in scenery and the fact that I find being around different people and different sounds and different things just really, yeah, I find that quite inspiring. And again, it's just something so different to what I'm doing or what I'm working on. It just helps me to think about things in a different way. So they'd probably be my major top tips. They're my two.
Amazing. Okay.
What would be
I will
yours?
I'll add a third one in, which I think is probably less of a tip, but just more of a comment, but a helpful comment, which is around just recognizing that not everyone thrives in a high energy environment all of the time.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Okay.
And acknowledging that difference piece, like just because, we're all different, we all bring value, we've all got strengths. And I think you've already said it, which is seek to understand what works for people. So get curious. Don't just assume, don't let really common archaic misconceptions or judgments bias about people and their behaviors inform how you believe they're doing or what they're doing exactly.
Yeah,
Because, and I'm saying this out loud as a guilty party in this, but I think it's so true. Just because people are quiet doesn't mean they're not thinking, doesn't mean they're not listening. To be honest, my experience is it's absolutely the opposite.
absolutely. I think Get Curious should be the headline just for this podcast in
I
general.
agree. I was going to say, I feel like we talk about curiosity all the
We
time.
do.
It's so important though, especially when you're managing and leading people. I talk about this I probably talk about it every day. I had a conversation with someone yesterday when I was talking about the importance of curiosity. So I talk about it every day, people. Get
So there's an
curious.
extra tip for you thrown in as well. Great stuff. All right. Well, we will conclude all of our top tips at the end of the episode.
It's now time for Bullshit Bingo, where we call out phrases which get commonly used in the workplace, which make all of us cringe. Our Bullshit Bingo for today's episode came from one of our CBBs, Katie, and it is H2. And we're not talking about the high-speed link.
Oh no, controversial.
Oh no, that's HS2, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
HS2.
Oh yeah, scrap that.
Oh, okay, well, fine. But I think it could have easily got confused with the high-speed link, but there we go. H2.
H2. Oh, I've used this.
I've used this as well. So we're talking about, well, actually, you tell me, what are we talking about? Just make sure I haven't misunderstood this.
So this came in from one of our CVs, Katie. Thank you very much. And it was the story around it was that she was talking to her partner and she used the term H2, and her partner doesn't work in the corporate world at all. And they were like, what do you mean H2? What is that? Like, what is H2? What does that mean? What does that stand for? And then Katie was like, oh, it's the second half of the year. And they were like, well, why don't you just say that, the second half of the year? I was like, well, no, because it's H2. It's H2. Like, right. What does that mean? Like, so anyway, there was this whole conversation, apparently, which I then got debriefed on around, yes, H2 and the slight ridiculousness of it out of context and out of somebody like not knowing what that means. Which is fair, because when you think about it, it is quite ridiculous, really, isn't it? We used to obviously have H1 and H2.
Yeah.
Come on. Come on.
I know. To be fair, I haven't understood it correctly, so that's fine, because I was suddenly like, oh no, maybe I've completely forgotten what this means. But yeah, H2, second half of the year. Yeah, I've definitely used this. Did you ever use H1 though? I don't think I've ever recalled using H1.
I think I have used H1. I also remember being in a meeting where we were talking about what day do we switch like
to H2
forecast to from H1 to H2, and being like, at the time I didn't think that was ridiculous. Now I'm out of it and I reflect back and I think, oh my goodness me.
Well, surely
like,
it's the 1st of July it switches over.
Oh, so anyway, well, it depends on your financial year, doesn't it?
Oh,
is your financial
God.
year,
Jesus. Okay, right, let's quit now while we're ahead. My God.
Yeah,
I don't think we should carry on.
I've mentioned the words financial year. Lisa's getting warm.
I'm already dead.
She's starting to feel hot and bothered.
Yeah, quite.
And she's shutting down.
I
Right, let's move on rapidly.
I hate anything to do with finance. Yeah, financial years, but nothing like sticking your head in the sand and pretending that things aren't happening to you. Cool, right. So CBBS. We've had H2. What else have you got for us? Come on. Tell us which bullshit bingo phrase to be exact, you would like included in a future episode. You can drop us a DM on Instagram or on either of our LinkedIn profiles. And yeah, let us know when and where you hear those corporate phrases. So we've got the context like Katie did for H2, because that is funny. And we will share them here on a future episode.
We are coming to the end of today's episode, where we've been discussing the concept of quiet thriving. So our top tips and recommendations from our discussion in today's episode are: number 1, start off small. Okay, so as Lisa said, just try and create 30 minutes in your diary each week for you to just book it out, block it off, and actually dedicate that time to doing a little bit of solo reflection on a regular basis. Just start somewhere and give it a go. Number 2, try and take yourself out of your usual working space. So you will find that if you do that, your state will change. Okay, you'll probably get some really good ideas come through. You might get a little bit more creative. And that's because it's a really powerful thing to do when we just want to mix it up and get a bit more free flowing in our ideas, in our reflections and things like that. So yeah, number 2, take yourself out of your normal workspace. Number 3, recognize that not everyone thrives in a high energy environment all of the time. So just be mindful of that and think about how and where you can maybe create that sanctuary or those spaces for people to go, just to allow them to kind of rebalance, re-energize like I used to do. And then 4, bonus tip right here, number 4, get curious. Okay, just get curious about what this might mean for certain people, what this means for yourself, means for your team, your colleagues, your boss. just ask a question and see what they say. Get curious around it, and you can't go far wrong. We also have some self-coaching questions to help you, and maybe even to reflect in your moment of reflection on this topic. So number 1, what does quiet thriving mean to you personally? Number 2, how do you create moments of peace and stillness in your daily life right now? Number 3, how do you recognize and celebrate your quiet achievements? And number 4, what can you do differently to cultivate quiet thriving for yourself? Don't worry if you're listening to this podcast out walking the dog and you're thinking, I'm never going to remember these. Well, you can look them up on our Instagram page because they will be on there following this episode going live. So that is the place to go. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, check out our previous episode on quiet quitting, which is in season 6, episode 7. So look for November 2022, and you can find this episode wherever you listen to your podcasts.
God, was it that long ago that we recorded Quiet Quitting? Bloody hell.
It was indeed.
The time has flown. The time has flown. Talking of episodes, actually, we will have another new episode for you next month in early July, and we're going to be talking about personal energy. So actually, that is a nice build on talking about quiet thriving. We're going to talk about energizing ourselves. CBBs, we know you are super busy, but it would mean the world to us if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the Coaching Cast wherever you listen. It takes just seconds and it's free to do. Or perhaps tell one person in your life who you think this podcast might help. Pass it on, send them a link or a specific episode. It really does help our podcast to grow. It helps people to find us.
And we like to end each episode of the Coaching Cast with our personal song recommendation, giving you energy and motivation as you launch into the next part of your working day. And it's my choice this week. And I've chosen What About Us by Pink, because I heard this song on the radio recently, Radio 2, OVS. And I just love it. It's such a good tune. It gave me real energy in the moment. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to put that as my song for the podcast. So yeah, go and put it on the old Alexa now and have a listen. My Alexa's probably about to come on now. Right. See you next month, CBBs. And remember, you've got this.